Welcome to Dune Chapter by Chapter. I'm Dominic. So in the last video I did, we discussed the chapter where Thufir Hawat seeks the help of the Fremen. They kind of join forces. And then there's a clash of cultures between the two because Hawat doesn't really catch on to what the Fremen are talking about and how they treat their dead and stuff like that. So it kind of gets a little bit dicey there for a second, but they end up joining forces. Then, unfortunately, they get swamped and swarmed by Sadukar. And that's where that chapter ended off. Now, in this next chapter, we have Paul and Jessica where we left them off in the desert rock. But here now they get picked up by, and they get reunited with Duncan Idaho and Liet Kynes. So they pick them up in the desert. And they bring them to one of Liet's kind of like, almost like hidden laboratories. That he had on Dune. Not really, but it's not really hidden, but it has like secret compartments and stuff in it that they used because they were under Harkonnen rule for 80 years. So they had to think of a lot of sneaky ways to get around the Harkonnens. And then this is when they really come to realize that, okay, yeah, Kynes is with the Fremen, Dr. Kynes, and Liet was like his Fremen name. So then what's interesting about this chapter is when they go back to the lab, we can see a real change in Paul in this chapter now. He's really taken on the mantle of manhood and being the Duke. So he's really stepped up his game and really stepped into that role. Because in this chapter, he kind of has like a battle of wills with Liet Kynes. So Liet Kynes is kind of questioning, why am I helping these people? By helping these people, I could be like, this could be my own downfall. And he still thinks like, well, are they any better than the Harkonnens? They're still like part of the Empire. They're still from, they don't see Arrakis the same way they do. Like Liet Kynes has a dream of changing Arrakis, terraforming it into a paradise planet, and that has water and all that stuff on it, and from the desert hellhole that it is right now. So Paul has to convince Liet that it's worthwhile for the Fremen to help them. And so they kind of have this battle of wills, and it's kind of interesting. And so first thing he does is Liet keeps referring to Paul as boy and lad and stuff like that. So finally, Paul stands his ground and says, listen, he said, from now on, you're going to refer to me as sire. He said, I am the Duke, he said. And he shows him the ring on his thumb, the judicial ring. He said, I am now like Duke. I'm now like the Duke. My father is dead, but I'm now the new Duke. I'm with the Atreides. And Liet is, kind of taken back a little bit, but then he kind of, he's starting to show some more respect for Paul because he can see that he has a backbone. And then, so then Paul has to convince him that it's worth for you to help us. And but before I get to that, one of the interesting things is when they get picked up in the desert, they can still see off in the horizon the Harkonnens going around with their las guns and thopters blasting the ground, trying to see if they could kill off Paul and Jessica. What they don't know was Duncan Idaho had planted a shield, body shield in the rocks and turned it up to full volume, I guess. And one of the las guns contacted it, and so you get to see what the reaction is when a las gun beam hits a body shield. So it's this catastrophic explosion that, even they felt the vibrations all the way there, and even to the point where Jessica thought, did you use the House Atomics on those guys? What was that? And he just tells them no. He says, so now they'll think twice about using their las guns again because they don't know where we're going to be using shields or not. So basically, what happens when a las gun comes into contact with a shield generator, they negate each other. They both cause this deadly explosion that wipes out both opponents. So I thought that was kind of cool, and we get to see that reaction in it. So back to Paul and Liet Kynes. So Paul starts to outline a plan. He says, we can take this case to the Landsraad, and we just need rock solid proof, that the Harkonnen are actually joined forces with the Sadukar, and the Landsraad is going to freak out when they learn this, because if this can be done to Duke Leto and House Atreides, if they can just be picked off by the Sadukar, then any one of the other great houses can suffer the exact same fate. They can also be picked off by the Emperor and the Sadukar anytime they want. So this would cause a huge outrage if they could prove it. Because what keeps all the houses in line right now is the Sadukar. But why the Emperor has to keep this alliance with the Harkonnen secret from the Landsraad is because even though as vicious as what the Sadukar are, if the Landsraad, if all the great noble houses join forces and turn on the Emperor, they don't stand a chance. Their combined forces is enough to overrun and take out the Sadukar. So this is why this is all done very secretly. But Liet Kynes, he doesn't have a lot of faith in this plan, and even his mother says, well, has some good points. And then Liet says to him, he said, I don't know, like what, he's still like questioning him, his loyalties and stuff. And then finally he says, I'll give you my word as an Atreides, Paul tells him. And my word is, I would, in this very moment, I would give I pledge my total allegiance to you and the Fremen right now. And in that moment, like, he would give his life right then and there for Liet Kynes. And he's so, what's the word I'm looking for? So he radiates such certainty when he says it that Liet Kynes has no choice but to believe him. And he believes him. He says, no, this guy really would. These Atreides really can be taken at their word. And even Jessica is taken back and amazed at how easy it is for the Atreides to gain loyalty of people. And which kind of plays into the whole overall theme of Dune is giving up your giving up your faith, or giving your faith to, or putting all your power to a charismatic leader, right? That's what Paul is. He's a charismatic leader. Same thing his father was, even more so than Duke Leto. He just has that charisma about him. He can just bring people over to his side and they'll be totally loyal to him. And so that's part of the whole theme of Dune. And that's why it ends up becoming later on, pretty disastrous for the Fremen, because they have such allegiance and faith and love for Paul Atreides, Muad'Dib. And now Paul even brings up the legend of the liaison al Gaib, the Kwisatz Haderach and all that, and even uses that with Liet. So while all this is going on, they're having this battle of wills, and then, eventually Paul wins the battle of wills, and he convinces Liet that yes, we'll be totally loyal. And then at that moment, the Sadukar bust in, and they have to do battle with Duncan Idaho. Now the way, from what I've seen in a trailer, I think this scene is actually in the trailer of the movie, when Duncan Idaho is battling all those Sadukar. And because he's got the still suit on and stuff like that. So I think that scene in the trailer, I think this is taking place in this kind of like hidden lab that Liet Kynes has. So he's out there and they open up the door and they see him, and he's going to town with his swords and stuff, cutting down Sadukar guys left, right, and center. But he's buying time for Paul and Jessica to escape. And then this really bothers Paul because he just keeps running. But then he feels like a coward. But he has no choice but to run if he wants to get revenge on House Harkonnen later on in the future. So anyway, this scene is where Duncan Idaho dies, is in this chapter. Doing battle, killed off while fighting off Sadukar, giving time for Paul and Jessica to escape. So Liet Kynes has like a hidden bolt hole in his in this room. So he opens up and there's lit arrows there. He says, "Take this way and hurry." He said, "At the end, you'll find the ornithopter, and the ornithopter, you guys can escape and get out of him." And he tells them, "There's a huge sandstorm, fly right into it and ride the storm." And he tells them how to do it. And he said, this is what the Fremen did all the time when they were stealing thopters from House Harkonnen, because they knew how to get in high up above the storm and kind of like ride the eye of the storm out, where the Harkonnens can never do it. They'd fly in there and get destroyed. So then this is where Paul starts to see like a weakness in his ability to see into the future. So they both go through the bolt hole. Liet Kynes takes a different path. So that way, if he ever gets captured, he can't tell where Paul and Jessica went because he honestly doesn't know. And then Paul and Jessica go a different way, get the Thopter, and then they escape. So while they're flying off, the Harkonnen are chasing after them in their Thopters, firing artillery shells and stuff at them. But then Paul kind of hits a spot where he doesn't really know what to do next because his prescience it's like a dark spot in his prescience. He can't see into the future. Where now, since this happened, since his mind has been opening up by being on Arrakis and consuming so much spice and having the spice around him and all that, and now he's starting to have visions more and more of the future. He's been almost becoming too reliant on him, and he kind of sees this in himself in this chapter. He realizes, this is becoming a weakness. I'm becoming way too reliant on being able to see into the future, my prescience, that it's like he compares it to using one sense all the time. Your other senses become dead. And so if you just use your eyesight, and then like your hearing and all your other senses aren't as acute. But if you don't have your eyesight, then your other senses become more acute. So he kind of compares it to that. So he's gotten so used to using his ability to see into the future that and letting that guide him, that now that he's hit this blind spot in the future where he doesn't know what's going to happen next, he's kind of a little bit weak in acting in the now, right now, and making decisions without knowing what's going to happen or having that guiding factor. So he recognizes that this is a weakness and he has to overcome it. So then they fly into the storm and they're just getting knocked around, and they're up as high as they can go because like the sandstorms on Arrakis are like brutal, like 700 mile an hour winds. It'll completely take the flesh off of a person and then etch the bones away as well. So like if a person gets caught in a sandstorm, like there will be nothing left in them. They'll be completely sandblasted away. So they make it in there and they get high enough, and then Jessica's doing the litany of fear and all that, and then they fly in there. The Harkonnens, they don't follow them in there, and then that's where the chapter ends, just them disappearing into this huge sandstorm that they use to get away from the Harkonnens. So this is a pretty good chapter, and we get some action with Duncan Idaho battling the Sardaukar. And then we get this kind of interesting battle of wits and dueling of words between Paul Atreides and Liet Kynes, where Liet Kynes is still skeptical of the Atreides and he's not really totally sold on Paul yet. But then Paul's able to convince him that it's totally worthwhile for him to be loyal to the Atreides. And then this chapter just illustrates how charismatic Paul can be. And this is part of the reason why he becomes such a formidable leader and, against the Emperor. So interesting stuff, really good stuff. I like this chapter. This was a good one, this last one. And then the only thing I was got a little bit confused there because it's been a while since I read the book, so I couldn't remember if Duncan Idaho was tortured to death by the Harkonnens or exactly how he died, and then plus I've seen the movie so many times, like the events of the movie and the book kind of get like crossed over in my mind a bit. But now that I read it again, this is his like last stand against the Sardaukar. So that's everything I got to say in this video. Let me know what you think in the comment section, and I will see you at the next one.